Derek Colman-Brusa is staying home.
You are Locked On Huskies, your daily podcast on the Washington Huskies, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back into a special bonus edition of the Locked On Huskies podcast. I'm Roman Tomashoff. That's Lars Hanson. He writes with me over at Huskies Wire. Thanks for making this your first watch or first listen of the day, as we are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And by the way, just happy May the 4th to all my fellow Star Wars fans out there. What a wonderful day to celebrate all this. But Lars, we don't have time for that today. I don't have time to get into all my nerdiness and everything like that, because Washington has officially landed a commitment from the number one player in the state of Washington, 4-star edge rusher Derek Colman-Brusa. So we got a lot to talk about with that. Talk about who might be next in the class, why he's such a just important add to the 2026 class on and off the field. But Lars, most importantly, right off the bat here, Washington's top two possible targets on the board: Kodi Greene, Derek Colman-Brusa, committed. Jedd Fisch is cleaning up on the recruiting trail right now.
You know, it's interesting. A story that might be coming up on Huskies Wire here in the next couple of days is just kind of watching the sidelines behind the spring game, before the spring game commenced, seeing Derek Colman-Brusa, seeing Lowen Colman-Brusa, seeing a handful of other people exchange with those two individuals, specifically Derek. And when I saw, I'll give you a peek behind the curtain, Jed Fisch is one of his kind of quietly favorite persons to mention when he comes to press conferences, Amber Fish. Amber had a 20-minute conversation, like a 15, 20-minute conversation with Derek. And in that moment, I was like, you know what? Afterwards, Matt Doherty had a conversation. Marcus Griffin had a conversation. And it just seemed like, you know what? Derek is soaking in this moment. He knows what's coming next. He knows it's going to be Washington. He knows he's home. A peek behind the curtain. I think Roman heard this, where I shook hands with Lowen Colman-Brusa and I said, welcome home. I didn't say go mention that to Derek, but it was kind of an unspoken, like, hey, you and Derek, welcome home, because it's about time.
A couple of things that we did also see on the sideline was Derek was hanging out with a bunch of the other UW commits and got to pose with Michael Penix, do that whole thing where I was like, oh, this is certainly an interesting development, where this is something you and I talked about last week. And then we got several questions from our everydayers in the YouTube comments where they said, hey, you guys said Derek Colman-Brusa rescheduled his official visit. Why was he there? And we were like, he decided to come on an unofficial visit. Wanted to make sure we cleared that up. And it was one of those things where, hey, this seems really important, where Kodi Greene was on campus. A bunch of other top prospects, and not just the 26 class, but 27, 28, and even 2029 were all on campus over the weekend. And it just seems like Washington is doing a really good job just on the recruiting trail right now, not even just in the 26 class, but just building momentum moving forward. And Derek was always a really big part of that. And we talked about him being one of the top two prospects for just this coaching staff overall in this class. It's because you needed that big, high motor, just ready to play right away if you need him sort of edge rusher along the defensive line. And I want to get more into the on-field stuff in a little bit, but off-field, it was always just, you could see that he was one of the guys that everybody gravitated towards. And this is somebody, Lars, who we've been seeing on the sideline for multiple years now, taking visits along with his brother. What always just felt like, yeah, we know what kind of target he is. We saw him on visits with Kalen's staff. And then last season with Jed's staff as well, where it was always, yeah, we know how much this coaching staff wants Derek on board and what he would mean to this program, especially as you make the move into the Big Ten and you need this, just so many big, just athletic defensive linemen like Derek. So seeing this all come to fruition just really feels like everything is moving in the right direction for this team.
Absolutely. And if you think about when Jed mentioned like Lowen being at center, and you look at, I took a photo actually, as you shouted out, go check us out on social media. I posted a photo with Lowen and Derek back, from the back view side to side. They're right about the same height, 6'4", 6'5", 300, 265 pounds, 267, I believe in Derek's case. But you look in those same size, and I was like, man, that's real. That's real. And we talk about Jed Fish, talk about, hey, getting bigger in the trenches, getting bigger offensive, defensive line, and Terry Thompson, all those guys that are transfers. Jed Fish really wants that coming in as a freshman class, and Derek was the guy where, you know what, you're going to get one of the top three guys in the state. Now you know for certain you have Derek Colman-Brusa. That's important for Jedd Fisch.
And all that talent that he brings to the table is, as you said, it's so important because what he brings on the field, it gives him the potential to play right away. And we'll get to that right after a message from our friends over at Supply House. Get the supplies you need from the site made for the skilled trades, Supply House. Whether you're in plumbing, HVAC, or electrical work, Supply House is the reliable way to order products online. Their easy-to-use website is packed with helpful resources and the latest product info to help you get the job done right. Plus, with a complete inventory of over 200,000 parts from 400-plus top brands, you'll find exactly what you need delivered fast from coast to coast. Need help with an order? Supply House offers expert support and industry-leading service, so you'll always talk to a real person. And for trade pros looking for an extra edge, their free Trade Master program offers exclusive perks like a dedicated phone line, free shipping, and discounts on every order. Thousands of skilled professionals are already taking advantage, and now it's your turn. Join the Trade Master program today at supplyhouse.com/TM and start ordering plumbing, HVAC, and electrical supplies with just a few clicks. Plus, use promo code SH5 for 5% off your first order. That's supplyhouse.com. So, Lars, on the field, I love what Derek brings to the table. A big physical defensive lineman. I can't say that enough. I know this is already the third or fourth time I've said it, but that is so important, especially on the edge, where I don't mean this is a slight to either player. They're just very different body types. Isaiah Ward, Russell Davis, what those guys bring to the table is still important because we've seen what kind of impact they bring. But as Jedd Fisch has alluded to with them, it's, yeah, right now those guys are more just pure pass rushers. That's where their skill set is. With Derek, you don't need that because he's close to 270 pounds, as you mentioned. He can shift inside and he can be that just athletic, just matchup nightmare, really, for interior offensive linemen because he's got the long arms. He's got that elite power that you see. I mentioned the motor a little bit earlier, which really does never stop, no matter if the play is coming at him or going away from him. And he's got a really refined just bag of pass rush moves right now. It can continue to get better. That's 100%. You can say that for everybody. But this is just one of those guys where you look at his film right now, even as a junior in high school, and it's, yeah, this is somebody who already looks like he could find a way to be a rotational contributor along a college defensive line. And I want to just have a little bit of that conversation right now when I think about what else this 2026 defensive line class could hold now that you got that big piece in the boat and you're not just kind of waiting on him. But it's just one of those things where I can see him being a rotational contributor from day one, and you pair him with, other guys that you're looking at, whether it be Fasiale, David Schwartzel, being the in-state guys, Anthony Jones, Landon Barnes, whoever else it might be that you really want to take along the edge in this defensive line class. Derek is just everything you could want and then some.
I'm going to give you a name. A more polished coming out of high school, Bralen Trice, where we saw the potential of Bralen Trice coming out of high school, where you saw the draft pick coming out, but initially it was like, hey, he's going to need a little bit of refinement. He can't play right away. That's why I agree with you that Derek could be that rotational piece day one. Again, might not even be in the two deeps. Again, we both understand the two deeps well, where there's some guys that are on the two deeps where it's like, wait a minute, he actually got the third or fourth amount of snaps, but he's on the two deeps as the number two guy. Derek won't be a guy that's on the two deeps as a freshman just because I think of the bodies at that position. But you look overall as a contributor at the end of the game, our PFF stats, where we talk about on Monday morning, he's going to be a guy where, hey, Derek played 12 snaps, 12, 15 snaps, had maybe a pressure and a half, 2 pressures. He just seems like a guy where when I saw him on the sideline, it was like, man, there is a presence that exists with Derek that doesn't exist with many other linemen, except that's when I come to mind, Bralen Trice, where a guy where you just looked at him and you're like, man, at the end of the day, 2 or 3 years down the line, you are going to see an incredible pass rusher. And to me, that's something that you can't pass up, and that's why Jedd Fisch prioritizes it so much.
So I like your comparison there. I would disagree, and I don't think your analysis there is off base. The reason I say that is because coming out of high school, Bralen Trice was like 220 pounds. And that's the biggest difference where as Bralen grew into his body and took that 2020 COVID shortened season off and chose to opt out and just get his body right and get bigger and get stronger, he turned into that, right? That's the difference here. And this is why Bralen was like a borderline 4-star recruit, like a high 3, low 4, and he was down between Washington and Notre Dame. Please go.
I was going to say, it was a 4-star on Rivals when I was working for Rivals as a publisher, right. So that's why I knew Rivals. But right. The only reason that's why I say more polished. He's a better high-end prospect, but the ceiling is still just as high, is my point.
So I like where you're going there because I had a different comparison in mind when I think about that size, that athleticism, and I don't think he's quite at that level because he was just freaky at multiple positions. But this is the best edge rusher prospect that Washington has pulled in out of high school since Laiatu Latu. That's the level of you see where I'm going with that, or that's the level of just caliber of player that you're getting here because Laiatu had that size. He was a little closer to 280, and he was just an incredible rugby player and had all that athleticism as well. But it's the same sort of high-end potential where he's got the long arms. He's got that just all those different passers that pass rush moves that you look for. He's got the bend on the edge. He knows how to long arm defenders, and he understands that where I remember, shout out to the Sound the Siren podcast, by the way. I remember going on with those guys over the summer and talking about the 2025 offensive class and talking about his brother, Lowen, and saying one of the things that is very clear about these two guys is that if you watch either one of them, it's very clear that they've spent their entire life training against another high-end competitor in one way or another. And it's all the technical skills. It's everything that you look for in just a refined offensive, or in Derek's case, obviously, defensive lineman that you would just look for in any kind of prospect, which is why he was so coveted by Oregon, by Ohio State, by USC, which is what makes this such a big win, Lars. And it just poses the question, who's next? And we'll get to that right after a message from our friends over at Monarch Money. Ever check your bank account and wonder, where did all my money go? Between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment, it's easy to lose track. That's where Monarch Money comes in, your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app, it's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place, so you stop just managing your money and start building wealth. When I started using Monarch, I realized just how much I was spending on food delivery. Now I budget smarter and save more. Instead of juggling multiple apps, you can use Monarch to check your finances, track spending, and even plan long-term goals. Managing money with your partner is smoother than ever. You can track shared and personal accounts, set goals, and stay on the same page without the stress. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKDOWNCollege at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKDOWNCollege for half off your first year. So, Lars, now that you got the big fish in the boat, we're going to have so much more on Derek throughout the week. This conversation just needs to be had. Who else could join Washington's class? Because we look up and down this list of visitors. You and I have talked about guys like Tiayu Mukais, David Schwartzel, Faciale being potential candidates along the defensive line, along with Anthony Jones, Landon Barnes. But I look around the rest of this 2026 class. We talked about it a couple weeks ago. Javian Osborne has made his commitment to Notre Dame official. So it kind of just ramps up the pressure on Brian Bonner. I don't want to say ramps it up a little bit, but it just makes that all that much more appealing for Washington. Plus Mason James, Chase Calicut, all these other guys. It feels like all the momentum is just in such a good spot for Washington that it just begs the question of Washington can get whoever they want. Who might be next?
When you look at it, everybody that we're talking about, 3 and 4 stars, Landon Barnes, Chase Calicut, Mason James, all these four, Anthony Jones, another edge rusher, David Schwartzel, a guy that we saw on the sideline before the spring game as well. Another local guy with the theme of Derek Colman-Brusa here. But you just look at it and think, like, Washington really is at this point having their pick of the litter. Kodi Greene was the obvious, the prime example of that, Derek now following suit. But you just go down the list, and it's who at this point is not going to choose Washington. When you look at a guy like, we mentioned Luke Weaver a bit, where at the receiver position, Washington has a plethora of picks. Defensive line, edge rusher, same thing. Where Derek being the top of that list, now you have your premium guy. You still need to add 2, 3, 4 guys to that list. But to me, Washington really is kind of having their pick of the litter at this point.
And that's the thing, right? Where you mentioned Luke Weaver, he did end up committing to USC a couple of days ago. I don't know if that one would be over just yet. It seems like Washington still wants to push for him just because of what kind of body type he brings to the class. Obviously, they're still pushing for Denarius Gray, the Auburn commit, after he took his official visit last weekend. But as I continue to just look up and down this class, it's exactly what you said, where we're not sitting here by any stretch of the imagination and saying all of Washington's top targets are committing to UW. That's not feasible, but B, that's not what we're going to sit here and do. We're not going to sit here and blow smoke. But the momentum is at such a point where it just feels like Jed and his coaching staff, if they want to close on somebody, they're going to do it. And maybe that's recency bias, but when your last two commits are a 5-star offensive tackle that you flip away from Oregon, and then your top target on the defensive line, who also happens to be the number one player in the state, it feels like you're moving in the right direction.
What's the one saying we have in the NFL? What's the one thing in professional sports? What have you done for me lately? Jed Fish at the college football level is saying, hey, look what I've done for you lately. A 5-star composite in offense in Kodi Greene. Derek Colman-Brusa, consensus 4-star, number one player in the state. To me, it's go close on some of those out-of-state guys. You already, by the way, Derek Zammit from New Jersey. You're talking about like coast to coast, California to New Jersey, and Washington State, everywhere in between. Jedd Fisch is closing, and to me, that's pretty telling.
It really is, and especially when, last thing I want to say about this before we get out of here, especially when last year you go out and you say, I want to get the number one recruiting class in school history, and then you fall short. It's a really good class. Let's be real about that. You came up just short of that with still what was a very good class, but you want to make sure that you can continue to grow year in and year out, and that's exactly what this is. By going out and saying, yeah, we're getting, like, you got the number one player in Washington State last year as well, and Zajas Rennie-Saleh, which was an excellent win. And now doing that in back-to-back years at positions of need, especially in the Big Ten and the front seven, it just feels like you're continuing to build things in the right direction. And it's why Jedd Fisch deserved a little bit of patience when it comes to building, it comes to everything that happened last season. The vision is clear. It might take a little while to execute, but this seems like a really big step in the right direction. And it just leads to let all the everydayers know that for all the latest breaking news about Derek Colman-Brusa, Kodi Greene, whoever else might be next in Washington's class, you got to make sure you subscribe to Locked On Huskies. Lars, as always, thank you so much for being here. Thank you to all everydayers tuning in. We really do appreciate your support. And remember, wherever you get this podcast, make sure you subscribe on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music. We're there. We're everywhere. We're updating this channel with new content every single day. So make sure to click that like button, click that little bell so you never miss when we post a new video. Any questions, comments, concerns, drop right down below in the comment section. And if you're audio only, please leave us a 5-star review. It does help us out a lot. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll talk to you on Tuesday.